Hello, good people, and welcome back. Today, having covered the used sets and dictionaries, I'd like us cover something on type conversions. So, conversions. What do you mean by this? So, what do you mean by type conversions? So, basically, the data types we have worked right now are int, float, string, boolean, bool or boolean. So what we're talking about here is how we can be able to convert from one type to another. So right now we're just going to focus on let's see how we try to convert an integer to a float or a float to an integer and the likes. So basically this happens mostly during calculations. So a calculation sometimes must mix an integer and a floating point number. So here we have an integer and a floating point number. Now, so if we have an example, if we have a 50.4% of human birth sample, example 50.4% human sample. So what this means is 50 divided by 100, 50.4 divided by 100, 50.4, because a percentage is 100, so we'll say 50.4 divided by 100 multiplied by the number of parts, right? If you want to see the actual number of males, you say it's 50% of human, so we want to see the number of parts multiplied by the human. So if the number of parts is an integer, if this is an integer, let's say this is let's say 500, so this is an integer, right? So we will be doing a calculation of a float multiplied by an integer, right? So this expression will do this. So we're going to multiply a float by an integer. Yeah, I hope we've seen that from what I've just written here. This being a float, number of parts we've said will be 500, so that will be a float multiplied by an integer. So we have types of conversion. So number one, we're going to talk about type conversion. Type conversion. So what does this mean? This means type conversion is conversion one type. No. Conversion of one type. Basically, as the naming says, type conversion, you convert from one type to another. Example, integer to float. Yeah. Then we have another type of conversion called implicit conversion. So this one is this is not done by anyone, but it's automatically made by the interpreter. Yeah, I hope that's clear. We have implicit conversion and type of implicit conversion and type conversion. So we have the type and then implicit. So if we have an example, if we have a result of an arithmetic operation, for example, addition, multiplication, the result will be a float only if either the operand of the operation is a float. So this is what we mean is for addition and multiplication. I hope you remember the signs for multiplication. So this one is a star and this one is a plus. So it's addition. So here's a plus. So for addition and multiplication, what will ensure that we have the result being a float or integer? So if one either, let me use the word either, if either, so if we have a positive and a multiplication, the result will be float. For addition, the result will be a float. A float if either so what this means is so what this means is the result of an addition or multiplication will be a float if one of them is a float. For example, if we have 5, if we have 4 plus 0.5, right? Here the result is going to be a float because we have a float already. Oh, that's clear. So here we have done an integer plus a float. Integer plus a float is equals to float. So as our description here goes, the result will be a float if either of the operation is a float. So as we've shown here, this is a float, so it's either one of them. So if we had an integer plus an integer, this goes for an integer, right? So we have a float plus an integer is equals to either of them is a float. We already have one float, so it becomes float. Sorry. And then okay, so which means as well float and float is equals to float. Hope that's clear of how the float comes in. So if either, so same case applies to multiplication. So had this been a multiplication, the result will be the same. Both for them they are the same. Hope that's clear. So if we do, okay, I've shown an example of 4 plus. So if we do 4 plus 4, the answer will be an integer. If we do 0.5 plus 4 or 0.5 plus 6, the result will be floating, right? So if either is a float, then the result will be a float. I hope that's clear. Now, so if a function is an integer it creates integers. So it can convert integer, float, strings, right? What I mean is we have something called conversion functions. So what this means is if we want to explicitly convert an item's type, explicitly, if we want to convert an item type explicitly, we have functions that are called conversion functions, right? So conversions can be explicitly performed using conversion functions. For example, we'll have an int. So if we have an int, this creates integers, right? So we can convert integers, floats, strings using the int keyword. We have a float as well. I hope this we had talked of float, and then we have string. So these are the functions we have that can change, or we can create. Int creates int, this creates float, and this creates string. How that's clear? That we have the converter functions, integer, float, as you've seen in the examples we've used when we were taking inputs from a user. We'd take let me see where we used here. We'd take input from a user, and we ask the input to be in a specific type, using either string or using a string, float, and int. Now I hope that's clear. So from now the conversion functions, we can let's discuss more on how the conversion functions works. So to convert a float to an integer, what will happen is this will truncate the floating point. Sorry. So what happens is, if you convert a float to an integer, it will truncate the floating point. It will truncate the floating point. Truncate the numbers fraction. So this is what happens when you convert fraction. This happens when you convert float to an integer. So an example, we have a temp is equals to 20.4567, right? These are float. We already have the floating point 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 floating point notation. So if we convert to int temp, right? So we already have this as a float, as we see here, it's a float. So we convert to int temperature. Now we're converting from a float to an integer, just as we've done here. So what we're saying is it will truncate. Truncate is to cut. It will truncate the floating point numbers fraction. What this means, it will cut this section, right? So we will remain with 20. So this will remain with 20. We can see an example of conversion. So I will just create here conversion. Now we've said we're converting convert float int. So we've said we have a temp is equal to 20.4578. So we can as we did initially we can see the type of temp, right? So what this does is shows us what type temperature is. So let's go to types. So we'll say Python convert, right? So as we've seen here in our terminal, we have the type of temperature is a float. Now let's do int temperature, right? So when we run this, I want to see the number we get when we do an int of temperature. So we'll say we now have a new this converts the data type from temperature from 20.456 to 20. So let's do this really, let me see, let's see how this, let's see the output of the example when you do an int. What happens when we try and convert the temperature from 20 to when we convert the temperature from a floating point to an integer. So when we do what we do is we'll do how do we print? Let's see how we print int. We now have called it int. Sorry. So when we do return this now, sorry. So what happens is when we convert to an integer, as we've seen here, it will truncate the other points. It does not check. It doesn't do the normal check when we do a floating point notation. I hope that's clear. So if you want to see the type, we'll put here the type. Yeah, type of this, not what I was trying to do. Hope that's clear. Okay. So hope that's clear. We see now here we have it as an integer. So we've converted the temperature from a floating point to an integer. And I hope that's clear that it truncates. It just cuts the other section. So this cuts the other section, as we've seen. Hope that's clear. So most of the time, the user input is normally a string. Most of the time, but we might want to explicitly convert it to a numeric type. That's why most of the time when we are taking input from a user, we have to explicitly ask it to enter an integer. So when user tries to enter a string, it won't accept it as a string. So we also can convert strings to numeric types. Whereby you convert, you can convert strings from a string to an integer. So if strings follow correct formatting using only numbers and decimal points, for example, we have an int. This is just an example. 500. So we can convert this to, this gives an integer of 500 despite it being a string. But this is a string because it has it's in a string type, but we can have it being in a string. When we output this, it will output 500, so it will show a value of 500. When we have a floating point, I think like float 1.75. So this is a string, right? But when we print it, we'll get a value of 1.75. I hope that's clear what I mean by the, like this will output the value of 1.75. This will output the value of 500. I hope that's clear. For the conversion, that should be it about the conversion of values from integer to strings and the likes. I hope that's clear from what we've covered so far. I hope we have given enough examples on string conversion. So next, when we get back, we shall do something about string formatting. I hope that's clear. You can do more examples on this. In case someone has any questions on this, you can drop down the comment section. I'll be able to handle it from this end. Let me know what you think about this, and have you encountered this in your day-to-day programming. Let's meet in the next one. Happy coding.